URLs for the Dory link?
Yeah, the Dory is, it's actually going to be up on the slide.
Oh, okay. You just tell me.
It's go/pweek dash Adoradory. Is that funny?
Really kind of hard to.
Adoradory. Yeah. But you can also tell them that it'll be up on the top here.
Okay.
And then it'll also be a slide over there. So we'll definitely have them.
Sure, testing, testing. I think this works. Yeah,
I think if you want, I could bring it down a little bit.
I think I'll try to maintain good posture. So standing up straight, I think this is,
Perfect.
yeah.
Okay, awesome. Hey everyone, thanks for being on time. We're going to start a little bit later because we're still waiting for some of the remote rooms to connect. So I think maybe in 2 to 5 minutes if you guys want to wrap up any emails or finish your conversations. Thanks.
Okay. Should I grab the mic? Is this okay? Okay. Hello. Good afternoon, and welcome to Privacy Week 2014. My name is Lawrence Yu. I'm a director of privacy here at Google. I wanted to introduce our first speaker for this week, who's visiting. We've invited Adora Spitak to come to us. She's actually returning back to Google. She's been here before. I'm going to read a little bit about her, and then we can get her started. First of all, Adora is probably not our typical speaker. She's 16 and currently 17 now. So happy birthday. And is coming from across the bay, where she's now a student at UC Berkeley. She's been called by Pacific Standard Magazine as one of the 30 top thinkers under 30, and going on to call her an activist for feminism, liberal politics, and youth-oriented causes. She's not a shy person and has been writing quite a bit. Since the age of 4, Adora has been exploring what she can do with the written word. She's been doing everything from championing literacy and youth voice to working with the UN's World Food Program to raise awareness about world hunger. She has written widely, including opinion pieces for Mashable and the Huffington Post, as well as contributions to poetry anthologies. And this year, she served as an advisor, youth advisor to the USA Science and Engineering Festival in Washington, D.C. And some of you may have seen her on TED, giving a TED Talk 4 years ago. And if you haven't seen it, I really encourage you to go and see her as a little bit younger person giving quite an impressive talk. The speech has been, it was titled, "What Adults Can Learn from Kids," so very, very appropriate. And I hope we can learn something from her today, too. The speech received more than 3.6 million views on TED.com alone and has been translated to over 40 different languages. Adora is coming back to us after having visited us at Big Tent about 2.5 years ago. I'm really thrilled to have her join us here today again. And I wanted to just give one quick note. If you have any questions, you can go to the Dory link that's up here on the slide, go/pweek-Adora Dory. And with that, I'd like to introduce Adora to the stage. So welcome, Adora.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. And for all of those of you who are tuning in via live stream, I feel you. Sometimes I don't want to leave my dorm room to go to lectures. It is so easy, but I highly encourage you to be in the same room as us. There's definitely a charm to being able to look at people's faces when you're standing right next to them that I think can't quite be replicated all the time over a computer screen. Now, I wanted to start with a question, which is, what does privacy mean to you? I know that you all, on a daily basis, probably interact in some shape or form with the definition of privacy, whether it's one that is handed to you at work or one that you develop yourself. But on a personal level, what does privacy mean to you? Any ideas? Choice? Not having yourself used in a way that you didn't okay? Not having to explain myself. Interesting. What else? This side of the room is quieter than me in my international relations lecture. I'm sorry? The right to be left alone. Great one. And anything else? Control of your personal information. Great. So these are all some answers that I really heard echoed when I asked my friends and classmates what they thought about privacy and ways that they had seen their privacy infringed or ways that they thought their privacy could be better protected. And I really want today's talk to be a true discussion. I hear a lot of input from you guys in ways like this. And I think that one of the most important things to get a discussion started is trust. And sometimes you earn trust by knowing someone for several years, and sometimes you earn trust by sharing really embarrassing moments with them. So I don't have the luxury of several years with you all, much as I would love that. So I'm going to start with a really brief story that I think illustrates one of the definitions I heard from a lot of friends about privacy. And this is one that I think was echoed by a few of you. But basically, I think a lot of people, myself included, really conflate anonymity with privacy sometimes. And that really typifies my generation because we're used to a Facebook that will give us, I said this in a conversation with Laura, that gives us the single Jewish women ads on the side, because of some weird search we did once. We're used to our information being used in ways that we're really confused about sometimes, but we're like, okay, I see that we're being sold things. But when it comes to staying anonymous, when we want to be anonymous, that is an area where we're a lot more vigilant. And so my story in this, which is very recent, specifically last week, it really begins in the wonderful city of Berkeley, and it's 10:30 p.m., and yours truly is decked out in full Grecian costume. Because with my friends, we were going to a party that was supposed to be the Cal Democrats' Halloween party. Yes, Cal Democrats parties exist. They're awesome. I'm not making that up. So the single most horrifying moment of that night occurred when my friend said, wait a second, I think you got the date wrong. This party is next week. And I'm standing there in my chitin that reaches my feet, and I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that I got decked out like this for nothing. Because our self-respect at that point was already at an all-time low, we decided to walk up and down Greek Row looking for where noise was coming from. And that was when I pulled out my phone, and dignity at a negative quantity decided to open Yik Yak. Does anyone here know what Yik Yak is? You can raise your hands. Okay, so it's basically an app that functions like a wall where you post whenever you want to. It's pinned to your location, but not to your name. You can add a handle if you want to. People rarely do. And so people use it for posting all kinds of weird stuff. At 2 a.m., things will get decidedly more midterms-oriented. Why did I put off studying until now, etc. And at 8 a.m., it'll be more walk of shame-oriented. So you can see that Yik Yak is an interesting place. And so my friend decided to use Yik Yak that night for the grammatically questionable post, where the party's at. And within 1 minute, someone responded in all caps with Cloyne, which is the name of a student co-op on the north side of Berkeley. So again, dignity very low. We decided to hike out to the north side for the sake of finding a party that night. We go there, we realize there's no music blasting, there are no people streaming in, and of course, we had gotten trolled. Now, we trudge back to my dorm, and we're looking at ourselves just thinking, wow, that was not where we thought our evening would go. And my roommate comments, you know Cloyne is the substance-free dorm, right? And we just look at each other like, okay, that explains kind of a lot. But the moral of the story that I drew from that night was, it's okay. It's okay that we posted where the party's at. It's okay because it wasn't our Facebook wall, it wasn't Twitter, it wasn't where someone could judge us for being really desperate freshmen on a Thursday night. And when we all broke into humiliated laughter at each other and at ourselves, it was okay because we knew that at least it was just in that circle, it was just in that dorm room, it was just on Yik Yak, and nobody else would need to know. And I'm assuming that you all, this being an internal event, that none of us will ever leave this room, right? Right? Now, the desire for anonymity that pervades my generation, that is seen so often on Thursday nights or Friday nights or really any night, it finds satisfaction in everything from Yik Yak to Secret to Whisper, 4chan, Reddit. There are so many places where you can go if you want to make up a name or not even need to have a name at all. I can still remember being this little kid on the internet and discovering a website which I'm still not 100% sure I know how to pronounce, Omegle. Fingers crossed that's how you say it. And Omegle was in its young days, just like me. I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, and my sister showed me this website with the alluring persuasion of a drug pusher. I'm not kidding. She whipped out her laptop, and she said, look at this, wisely. You can talk to strangers. Now, to those of you who would question the big sister who shows her little sister website where you can talk to strangers, I also questioned it maybe 5 years later. But hindsight is 2020. Who here has seen like Omegle, Chat Roulette? Have you heard of those sites? I'm seeing some raised hands. Okay, pretty universal. Well, maybe it was the foreignness of the whole thing, or the edginess of such implied danger, yet the safety of the insurmountable wall of the computer screen, or the ease with which we could carelessly toss our conversation partners away as quickly as we had found them, that made Omegle so addicting. Or addicting, at least, as a way to pass time if you were really bored. Now, one of my favorite websites that utilizes anonymity is postsecret.com. Have any of you been on PostSecret? Okay, I'm seeing some raised hands. So PostSecret is the brainchild of curator Frank Warren, who gave a TED Talk that was really powerful about secrets, and it's a community art project that solicits secrets on the backs of postcards. People confess to dark thoughts about loved ones, reveal childhood abuse, make jaded or optimistic comments on the state of life or their lives specifically, or they write cryptic messages to people they know. Marriage proposals have been made over post-secret thank you letters and letters that have never been sent. All of these things wind their way up on this website. And so when I was a confused 14-year-old just starting my sophomore year in high school, I sat next to this tall senior in my AP Art History class, and he instantly became the subject of an intense, confused crush, which I wrote about to Post-Secret. I hazily remember saying that I felt bad for wanting boys to like me so much because, again, I was 14 years old, and this is a time to share embarrassing stories to build trust. And at the age of 14, I was only willing to write this on the back of a postcard because it was the back of a postcard. I was willing to send this in because I knew that it would be kept secret. Anonymity is a kind of ultimate safety in this world where we feel like anything can be tracked back to us. And in reality, in many places where we think we're anonymous, many things can be tracked back to us. As a teenager, this ability to have secrecy, to have anonymity, represented both my downfall and my saving grace. It meant that on Thursday nights I could post something embarrassing on Yik Yak or make confessions to Post Secret. But it also meant that all the people who hated my TED Talk could leave deeply offensive comments and I would never know their names. In the end, I decided I didn't want to, but the very real concern that comes with giving people spaces where no one has to know your name is, of course, the extent to which it enables cyberbullying and harassment. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the ways that anonymity really enable people online to do what they want or to contribute to discussions, whether in meaningful or offensive ways. Have any of you participated in something online anonymously? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of raised hands, at least once or twice. I think many of us have probably done that. So what were some of the reasons you did that? Was it casual? Was it on purpose? Does anyone want to talk a little bit more about reasons? Being lazy? Okay, maybe too lazy to like set up a user account. That's a very real reason. Anything else? Yeah? To remove personalities and ego from a conversation, really powerful reason. Any other reasons? What about, oh yeah. Lack of commitment. I really like that. Is there a time when you've ever been anonymous because you wouldn't be able to say the things you said if your name was attached to them? I know that for myself, like definitely, I've made comments on things that weren't mean, but were more opinionated than I would feel comfortable with being in my own skin, which is maybe a reflection on how I need to be more comfortable with being loud and being outspoken. But I think that's an experience that is shared by a lot of people, where they are anonymous because they feel like they'll be penalized if they speak up on an issue that's important to them. Or they remain anonymous because they don't want an experience that they've had that may be traumatic or fairly defining to be associated with them in that way. And so it's incredibly important, I think, to have those spaces for people. Now, a strange addition to my point about how much young people value anonymity, though, is also that we share more and care less. There's this really good article in The Atlantic entitled Why Kids Sext, and it describes the trend of all these high schoolers and even middle schoolers using explicit photos as a sort of social currency. And law enforcement officials reported being utterly confused as they called all these people into their offices, or they would call people up for investigations, because in many cases the trading of these photos is child pornography. But they would talk to these girls who had explicit pictures visible online, and they'd be like, "We have really bad news for you. Like these photos of you, we've been finding them on multiple devices." And in some cases, they would receive blank stares from the girls, and the comment, "That's okay. I wanted them up there," or "It's not a big deal." And the law enforcement officials were completely shocked because it was like naked photos of you on a website, on Instagram, on some kid's phone. Like this doesn't matter to you, or this doesn't set off alarm bells. But in some of these cases, the kids were like, yeah, not a big deal. Not a big deal. Our generation's focus on sharing means that all of our countless small rebellions are detailed, maybe photographed or filmed, uploaded, posted. Every single infraction we've committed, every style faux pas we made in high school, it's getting uploaded, tagged, shared, and in many cases part of that permanent digital trail, that record. Because even when somebody posts something on Facebook they regret and they take it down 2 minutes later, 2 minutes is easily enough time for someone to take a screenshot on their iPhone and share it with other people. But this brings me to another important point. As a result of our long trail of digital footprints, increasingly every rebellion we undertake, whether out of youthful folly or something longer lasting, I think that it affects how we judge or don't judge society and ourselves. As we grow up, the ubiquity of material that might put us in a bad light somewhere, somehow, combined with our habit of transparency and expecting sharing, will lead to greater societal tolerance. If we adhere to the idea of let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, we'll be hard-pressed to pass judgment on our peers. So instead of calling all the time for self and institutional censorship, as so many generations before us have done, I think that many members of my generation will call for greater understanding. And that's already been happening if you just look at the fact that Bill Clinton had to say about marijuana use, I did not inhale, but Barack Obama openly admitted to pot and cocaine use in high school and college in his book Dreams from My Father, with little more than murmurs resulting from the opposition in either 2008 or 2012. As we rebel in different ways, we share more, and we find that we cannot outgrow our rebellions just by throwing something away, because you can't exactly burn a digital trail. We have to learn to deal with their existence in our digital footprints. If photos of things we've done exist, why deny that they ever happened? The radical openness that results from the inevitable intersection of sharing and rebellion applies to far more than the privacy settings we use or the images we share. It's also relevant to how we treat taboos in society and ethics. Puritan and Victorian attitudes, remnants of bygone times, really linger a lot in today's culture. I remember growing up, my parents told me there were 3 things you never talked about in polite society. You never talk about politics. You never talk about money. You never talk about sex. But if you try talking about those topics to a group of strangers in a college campus, or I think prefaced by the right things, there's a lot more openness with 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and onward. Those unmentionables are probably some of the most interesting conversation topics around. I think that the increasing willingness of young adults to not only consume content that has to do with those oft-silenced categories, but to share is indicative of our increasing openness. There are several top apps on the market that allow users to overshare. This website, bedsider.org, which provides information on birth control and contraception to young adults, started an app called Booty Log, which is, as you can imagine, pretty controversial, but people actually snapped up the idea of an app that allows you to overshare, depending on your definition of that. And posting is, again, anonymous, but it's still pretty radical to anyone coming at it from a standpoint of conventional morality. Politics has always been very polarizing, but it's now a lot easier for the average person to be very public with social media campaign dashboards and being able to post on Facebook that you just took part in a canvassing campaign, or post that you just went door to door with an organization. I think that when we're really brought face to face with issues that pop up in our newsfeed, we have to confront them in a way that would be a lot easier to skate past when you're just avoiding having those conversations in person. Our youthful rebellions transcend squabbles about who gets to take the family car or what a bag of weed was doing behind the couch. Rebellion has always had world-changing possibilities, but only rarely has rebellion's consequence been world-changing by default. Thanks to our shameless sharing, at least in some cases, I think that radical openness will increasingly become the norm. Confrontations, both explicit and implicit, with stigma and tradition and power will occur on new terrains of rebellion. So what will the world look like when the dust has settled? My hope is that it will be a world where one infraction is no longer enough to knock someone from the perch of power. That this isn't the kind of world that existed back when George McGovern's running mate was basically knocked out of the running by people finding his psychiatric records. I hope that we're going to live in a world where we must instead evaluate the totality of a person's character and their actions, but where we don't cast stones of blame based on tiny things that happened in someone's past, because our screens with our long and winding digital footprints makes it too easy to look in the mirror first. My generation's take on rebellion as the ultimate instrument of tolerance might be extraordinarily idealistic of me to propose, but I think that even as defined as we are by innovation and creation above reaction, that the fruits of our youthful revolt need not be so different from our sitar-strumming, weed-smoking, Beatles-playing forebears. Sure, youth in the 1960s might not have ever envisioned that a movement towards tolerance decades later would be enacted on screens, but I do think that the openness, that the increase in sharing, that the amount that me and my generation are willing to put out there will lead us to be increasingly tolerant of our peers. Now, although anonymous posts on Yik Yak or nude photos on Snapchat certainly have their place in this discussion, I'm also really curious about how technology can shape the way young people see themselves playing a role in social change today, and not just in becoming more tolerant individuals years down the road. Betty Friedan said in her groundbreaking work, The Feminine Mystique, about young people who were lacking passion for causes larger than themselves, quote, "There was literally nothing these kids felt strongly enough to die for, as there was nothing they actually did in which they felt really alive. Ideas, the conceptual thought which is uniquely human, were completely absent from their minds or lives," end quote. It's one of my favorite quotes from The Feminine Mystique because and it's hilarious because it has absolutely nothing to do with women at all, at least taken out of context. But I look at that quote and I think, is that the way that some adults might see me and my generation today? Because from appearances, we're taking all these selfies and we're doing a lot of things which don't have a whole lot of impact beyond ourselves and our limited spheres of existence. But I think that's where technology can play an incredibly important role. I want technology to be a force to combat that apathy, not perpetuate it. After all, beginning to use the internet at the age of 5, referenced in my online journey, I hope you expected this would be a pretty long journey, but I started using the internet at the age of 5, and it was one of the instrumental events that catapulted me to greater social awareness. I grew up being homeschooled for 8 years, mainly because my parents thought it would be a waste to send a 3-year-old to preschool to learn her alphabet all over again, and a crucial part of my experience was using the internet. Suddenly, I had the New York Times and BBC Schools at my fingertips. I could play educational games on the UNICEF website or nobelprize.org. I absolutely loved just rediscovering how to cure malaria and come up with vaccines on those websites. And when I started writing stories at the age of 4, I remember that I would ask my parents to help me look up all these baby name websites so that I could come up with creative names for characters in my books. Unfortunately, it resulted in a lot of names I couldn't pronounce, but, you know, you win some, you lose some. I took classes online for several years in middle school, and in high school, even after I started going to a brick-and-mortar school, my insatiable desire to learn whatever I could get my hands on made me sign up for way too many massive open online courses, or MOOCs, on sites like Coursera. Although statistics about the abysmal completion rate for MOOCs, I think I single-handedly drove that number up because I would sign up for 20 courses, and I would be all, okay, I'm going to do all the assignments, and all 100% of the quizzes, and then, I would get halfway through and realize that there are only so many hours in the day. I'm sorry, Coursera. The first blog I ever set up was titled, quite simply, Adora's Blog. And it was on blogger.com, so yay, Google, you made the right choice, that acquisition. My second ever post was titled Adora's Real Diary. I was very optimistic about that. I figured that I could post my real diary online. And it gave a very exhaustive account of the events of the day. I'll spare you that one, but I'll read an excerpt from another post back in when I was 7 years old. And I said, quote, "I just finished watching a great movie yesterday. It's called Citizen Kane, and it's one of the best movies of the century." I fashioned myself as kind of a cultural maven, I guess. Clearly, 7-year-old me had great taste in movies. I added, quote, "Oh, by the way, I'll be at Third Place Books in Forest Lake Park on November 20th. You can listen to my sister Adriana's violin if you have enough of my fiery words. I'll be doing live writing, and I'll make my voice boom in the microphone. At least I hope so," end quote. And I looked at that, and I was like, dang, younger me. She really makes me laugh. Not just because of the lack of sophistication in my writing, but the audacity. The pushing the limits of what I could get away with saying, because I didn't know that I was getting away with anything at all. I said in my TED Talk that one of the things that we have to learn from young people is really courage and naivete, and I think that I exemplify that at that age because I really did believe that I, as this tiny little girl, could make my voice boom in a microphone that I could barely reach. In many ways, I miss the courage that made me say things like that, and I asked myself, as I was writing this, where did that courage go? Well, in many ways, I found that courage simultaneously expressed and circumscribed by the life I lived online in parallel to my real life. Everything I've done in the public eye is documented somehow, somewhere online. If you do a Google web search for my name, I did not do this, by the way. That is narcissistic, and I would never, ever Google myself. But you'll find 128,000 results. And if you do a video search, you'll find 62,000. I started my YouTube channel in 2005 when I was just barely 8 years old, and I got on Facebook when I was 11. Shh. I said that my birthday was October 15th, 1992, which it totally is. And so that led to some interesting quandaries later on. But the trail I've left online is almost as long as the trail that I've traveled in real life. I can scroll through my Facebook timeline and find all these status updates and photos that remind me of times of happiness, fear, and sadness. And if I ever do decide to enter politics, I can only imagine how much fun folks would have digging through my various online profiles. As the politics joke alludes to, there are benefits and downsides to being so public so young. I received tremendous opportunities from being known online, ranging from speaking engagements to being offered positions on committees. And I got teaching opportunities through online video conferencing with schools and conferences around the world. I can remember being 11 years old and having the opportunity to deliver 4 video conferencing sessions with a bunch of students at a leadership conference in Dubai, a place where I had never been. And just being able to connect with a world that was completely foreign from the one that I lived in, it made it a lot more interesting when I actually visited Dubai 2 years later. I was able to see some of the places that some of the students I'd talked to had referenced, and I was like, whoa, this is pretty crazy, and I'm glad that I lived this life. I also used online tools, including Google Docs, Google Hangouts, to organize a yearly conference called TEDx Redmond with a committee of 20 other high school students, and we attracted over 700 attendees every year. And over the course of 4 years, I had the chance to work with more than 60 speakers, all of whom we found in some way or another because we read about them online. Now, this is the rosy picture of my life on the internet. Here was the drawback. As I became more visible, some people became a little too fascinated by my story and my life and began to harass me. There was a show called The World's Cleverest Child and Me, featuring a popular British TV host interviewing kids around the world, including yours truly. And there was a man in Britain who saw that show who started following me on Facebook and Twitter. It seemed very innocuous at first. He would comment surprisingly often on my updates, but that was all. And then he friended my mom, which a lot of my friends don't do voluntarily. But I have a lot of friends who are friends with my mom. But he also friended my dad, which was really weird, because nobody friends my dad. And, I mean, my dad's a great dude, but he just, like, never goes on Facebook. And he friended my sister. And that was really weird, because when you friend someone's mom, okay, that's weird. When you friend someone's dad also, that's, like, okay, alarm bells. And when you friend their sister, too, it's just like, what are you doing? He also started sending me frequent and unwanted messages, and when I didn't respond, grew increasingly angry, and eventually we decided collectively that we would all just block him. Problem solved, right? Easy. But that's where the real problem started. He made new Facebook accounts under fake names to continue following me. And when my family members blocked those accounts as well, it was kind of like cutting off the heads of a hydra. He found my dad's cell phone number and decided to call him. My dad, who is the politest guy imaginable, just politely requested that he stop contacting members of our family, and we thought we were done with the saga when we didn't hear from him for a few weeks. And then I opened my mailbox one bright July morning. To give some background, I absolutely love sending and receiving handwritten letters, and usually I let out a little gasp of happy surprise when I get a letter from somebody that I know and like. But that day was different because the letter was from him, and my gasp of surprise was a gasp of shock and also of fear. He hadn't listened to my dad's polite request that he stop contacting us, and instead had actually found my home address somehow and sent us a letter. Now, the idea of having a cyber stalker who knows your family's Facebook pages, your dad's cell phone number, and even your home address would be reasonably frightening to most adults, I think. But at the time that he started following me online, I was 12 years old. In the aftermath of receiving a letter from him, I can remember, and I'm still like a little shocked that I did this, but I started crying because I was just like, this stranger knows where I live, and all that separated me from this individual was the Atlantic Ocean, so that should have been reassuring, but that ocean, thanks to the internet, would never be quite wide enough to ensure that I could live my adolescent life at least completely harassment-free, and even the Atlantic didn't seem wide enough to dissuade him from escalating his stalking attempts. One August, he sent a message to my dad saying he was thinking of coming to Seattle to see TEDx Redmond, the conference that I organized with my team. And I thought with great dread about that possibility, that he would try to see me in person. So 5 years after he first saw me on TV in the UK, he continues to be a presence through unwanted messages that go directly to my other folder. My family and I found that he didn't escalate his attempts to try to contact us as long as we didn't explicitly block him, but we obviously don't accept his friend requests either. It's a very imperfect solution. And if I could wave a magic wand and just make all of that go away, I would. But in 2009, there wasn't much of a resource, and there was certainly no magic wand for a scared 12-year-old who only knew the phrase Facebook stalking by its lighthearted teenage girl definition, the kind of Facebook stalking that you joke about, going through your really close friends' pictures and liking them all. That was Facebook stalking to me, but in 2014, there still isn't much of a resource for a 17-year-old girl who has a wider definition for Facebook stalking, one that includes a list of people like that guy in England. Now, sites like Facebook and Google+ may do an all-right job of allowing users to pick who they want to see updates, but they can't change the very human problems behind things like cyberstalking, the presence of obsessive individuals who will find means to get around blocking, if necessary, to contact victims, and the difficulty of balancing the necessity of living a public life with the crucial nature of personal privacy. And there are many things that I want to share with the public, but it's just a public that I wish didn't include people who stalk me online. Just as they do in real life, however, the dark and bright sides of my online journey walk hand in hand. So many of my greatest opportunities have happened because of things I posted online. More than 3 million people have come to TED.com to watch that 2010 talk, and many more have watched it from other sites. I have traveled around the world to give speeches on youth and education because of that talk. And tonight, when I hop on a flight to Dublin to be speaking about young people and technology, I realized that that wouldn't have been possible either without the writing, speaking, and teaching I've done on the internet. The blog that I started writing when I was 7, well, 10 years later, I'm still writing there. Writing a blog gave me a way, even at that young age, to feel like I was leaving some footprints in the sands of time. And there's truly nothing more valuable you can give to a young person than to feel that their presence on Earth has some more value than just sitting in a classroom chair for 13 years, or 12 or 13 years, and to give them the opportunity to shape more than the world immediately at their fingertips. The internet is a powerful place to be an activist as a young person. You can publish your writing, your videos, your images. You can use social networks to distribute petitions and even launch game-changing Twitter chats like the hashtag Student Voice conversation that has looped in education reform-minded students from around the nation for a conversation on how schools need to change. But activism, blogging, and other forms of self-expression, these are things that people do very much in the public eye. I didn't completely realize the power of anonymity online, even as much as I frequented websites like Omegle and PostSecret, until I became deeply involved in a project that really relies deeply on protecting the privacy of users. Because last month I got with a group of friends and I started working on an idea for entry in Berkeley's Big Ideas contest, which provides grants to groups of students for good ideas. And our project is a website called The Side Effects, spelled FX because side effects spelled normally was taken as a domain name. And our description reads, many public health officials agree that the war on drugs didn't really work, driving drug use underground and sending millions of people to jail for nonviolent offenses. In a nation where 6.8% of American high schoolers have used cocaine, it's clear that the United States has a drug problem, less clear is how to solve it. Our mission isn't to stop all illegal drug use from occurring, but rather to provide users or potential users the information they need to make informed choices. So it's easy to find physiological side effects of drugs just by something up on Wikipedia. Much harder to find is the societal impact, the societal side effects. No one knows about the 14-year-old drug mule getting shot by a rival cartel on her way back from dropping off a cocaine delivery, or the journalist kidnapped and executed for daring to speak out against drug violence, or the disproportionate incarceration of minorities for drug offenses. And it's those societal side effects that we hope to provide, along with a comprehensive list of the physiological side effects. So one thing that we really want to feature is first-hand accounts from users. Now, as you can imagine, as a group of fairly straight-laced UC Berkeley students, we were not about to be able to provide all of those first-hand accounts of using drugs ranging from cocaine to ketamine ourselves. Not to mention that basically that would be very difficult to just say, like, hey, we're going to just the four of us get a bunch of drugs and obviously be able to provide these accounts. That was not going to happen. So instead we realized that we would really need to rely on the community that was larger than us. But how do you go to your friends and say, hey, we want you to talk about something as sensitive, as personal, as highly charged as your drug use, and be totally okay with having that information out there? You don't do that. It's impossible to collect reliable primary sources on something this sensitive without the promise of privacy. Not many young people are willing to come out publicly saying, I've done X, Y, and Z, and let me tell you about my experiences, which is exactly what we needed to get minus names. So being able to provide a safe space for people I knew to write honestly and openly about their experiences meant that we had to make sure that they knew we weren't going to be tracking anything back to them. And the hilarious thing is that I ended up going with a really decidedly low-tech solution, which I'm sure some of you will inform me this is not actually that private and it's totally possible to track it, but I know that I can't. And I used Google Docs to make a form that I just sent out to a bunch of people. And I said I'm not collecting names. I'm not going to, try to figure out who said what. And maybe that was overly idealistic. Maybe I could go through and look at timestamps of when people submitted it and try to deduce from that who used what and when. But I realize that so much of what we do online relies on assumptions, relies on trust, the kind of trust that I attempted to build at the beginning of this by telling you embarrassing stories. So much of what we do online relies on the assumption that the companies we use every day as neutral receptacles of our information, or at least supposedly neutral, that they aren't out to hurt us. And maybe we give all the Facebooks and Googles, Microsofts, Tumblrs, Instagrams, Vines, Snapchats, etc. of the world too much credit for being reasonably not evil, but how can you blame us? We're idealistic. We're used to putting our trust in the companies that we grew up with. So according to a Google search, so I'm hoping this is accurate, Google was founded on September 4th, 1998. Is that right? That's accurate? Okay, good, because it came from the Google search. And that means I'm only 1 year, 1 month, and 11 days older than Google. I was thinking about that, and I was like, whoa, I'm older than something, finally. Believe me, being a 17-year-old freshman is an interesting experience. I grew up blogging on Blogger, and filming on YouTube, and emailing on Gmail, and it's weird to think about anything that started in a garage in this way, but today, Google is the establishment. Just like our famed 1960s forebears, today's young people will question the establishment if they're given reason to. Instead of Vietnam, the draft, or free speech on university campuses, though, our modern struggles relate to the new tools we have at our disposal and their potential dark sides. We're concerned about things like the questionable extent to which our data is used to sell us things that complicated algorithms have determined we may want. But we're also more concerned with the sharing of personal data, the lack of informed consent, because let's face it, we never read those 60-page agreements, we just click yes to them. And we're also very scared about the lax protection of content that we trust is safe, things like the hacking of Snapchat servers. I think that scared a lot of my friends much more than the personalized ads we get on the sides of websites ever did. So will privacy prove to be our Vietnam? I'm not sure. But when I was talking to one of my friends, I mentioned that I would be giving a talk that was at an event relating to privacy. I didn't say anything more because, internal event and stuff. So hopefully y'all are happy. But his eyebrows shot up and he was like, whoa, that's so cool. And then he said, you're going to be on the side of privacy, right? And I looked at him with a quizzical expression. And I was like, wait, say that again? And he was like, you're going to be on the side of privacy. And I thought, wow, I never thought of it as a side that one had to be on. But in reflecting on all of my experiences in a journey growing up on the internet, I responded to him with a resounding yes. Because at 17, I may be young and uninhibited enough to, like many of my peers, move towards a life of more transparency or even oversharing. But at 17, I am also still old enough to realize that I have some thoughts, some moments better left unseen. We love the windows that the internet opens to the world. Oh, that actually kind of works as a pun. Windows, get it? Okay, that was terrible. We love those windows, but we also want the choice of whether or not to open the curtains that keep our lives secluded from casual passers-by or companies or governments to be entirely our choice. giving young people like me the spaces to express ourselves anonymously, to speak up constructively, and to protect ourselves from the people who would do us harm. These issues, I think, are what my generation thinks of when we're asked, what does privacy mean to you? And they're crucial to the ways young people view the companies we grew up with, and how you all address these issues may very well decide if we choose to stay. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. I'd love to start more of a dialogue and hear some of your thoughts and your experiences. So I find it really funny that it's Adora Dory also, because my sister calls me Dory. It's been a nickname since I was a little kid. Definitely appropriate. Any questions from those of you in the room?
Yep. Yeah, so we have some questions in the dory, but if you have any live questions, please come up, and I think we'll bring up the questions here in just a moment.
Oh, there's a mic right there.
So I, despite being about 10 years older than you, also grew up on the internet. I was on the internet from a very young age, which is somewhat unusual for my generation, but also somewhat not. And I feel like it was a very different internet and a very different message when I was young. First of all, when I started out, I got pretty much no messaging on what to do, but there was little enough interaction that you didn't really need someone to tell you, don't give out your personal information, don't tell someone where you live, because you usually couldn't. Then we got sort of to the stranger danger phase of internet privacy for kids, which is don't tell anyone your name, don't tell them where you live, don't agree to meet with them, etc. And while some of those things are still true, I'm wondering what you think about what we, as Google, as big companies that have, users that are sometimes children or even, privacy-concerned adults, should be telling people, and what opportunities we should be providing them that we're not.
That's a really good question. And I remember, so when I started doing those video conferencing sessions, teaching students, then one of the classes I presented on was digital literacy. And I think that in the early days of presenting that, it was pretty stranger danger focused. And I said, obviously, here are the basics. But as we moved along, it became obvious to me that I really needed to add more, particularly when I was speaking to high school students about don't post things that you wouldn't want to see 30 years down the road or that you wouldn't want to come up in a presidential campaign. This was more of a joke from my own life. But I think that needs to be a crucial part of any kind of messaging around sharing. But another thing is that it's very easy to circumvent any kind of age requirements. Like a lot of people I know will just obviously say they're 18 or say they're 13 when they need to. So presenting information only to a group of users that you know to be under 18 will still miss a lot of people who are pretending to be older than they are. I think that focusing on ways to have succinct and fairly universal messaging to hit some more of those folks is important. And another thing is just kind of dealing with the realities that we know. I know that a lot of people, regardless of how often I tell some of my friends, like, don't post that picture or don't post that thing, that they probably won't, but giving them the tools they need to make lists, to figure out who they want to see it, all of that can be a little more explicitly presented, I think. Google Plus does a really good job with circles. Yeah, I guess those would be some of my thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say about balancing? So when you sign up for a new service, a lot of people just want to use it right away and they want to get to the fun part. So what would you say is in your opinion, is a good way to balance getting to the fun part versus presenting a bunch of important information like, by the way, if you post things on here, everyone in the world can see them unless you go and do these settings?
I think that maybe not presenting as a barrier to use, although that's like a pretty effective way. If a product is so amazing that people will be willing to like click through any amount of stuff to get to it, then it's pretty effective. But I think probably better is just to have people who I think young people respect and are willing to listen to come forward and talk more. One area that I've been disappointed in with digital literacy or with, I guess more broadly, issues of privacy and what to share and stuff is that there aren't a whole lot of, I wouldn't say like celebrities, but really vocal people who are coming out to young people and saying, here's I guess, making it an issue the same way that we would see any other issue of importance, like the environment or women's rights or whatever being an issue. So I think there needs to be more of a media presence, so that the first time somebody hears about these kinds of things or hears about what they should be doing or not be doing online isn't just when they log into a service. It should be at school, it should be on TV, and a lot of other areas.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I have a question here from TV Land. And this first one is from Anonymous. Question is, how do we deal with the increased ease with which someone's life can be destroyed by smear campaigns, trolling, or just accidental misinformation in anonymous environments?
That's a really good question. Wow. Okay. Well, I think I want to emphasize my role as a non-expert here and somebody who has kind of dealt with a lot of stuff that is only limited to my own personal life. And I think that it's very easy to go a little crazy when you are high on the power that comes with being anonymous and to say things that the flip side of that whole being able to say things that you wouldn't be able to say if you had your name attached to them can also have a very dark side, as you all are very well aware of. I think that creating a culture is an incredibly important part of that. If you look at why there are, why you don't go on 4chan instead of on Reddit or like certain subreddits, then it's because of culture. And I'm not sure the extent to which that can be changed once a culture is very embedded in its users and in what gets posted, but I think that moderation helps. I think that trying to introduce minority voices that aren't usually heard, a lot of these forums, I think, that are anonymous, where people tend to post stuff that is very misogynistic, violent, or whatever else, probably don't have a whole lot of women or people who might otherwise provide kind of a voice against that sort of misogyny, violence, whatever else. So working more on expanding the types of users that you're receiving, changing culture, not easy things to do, not overnight things to do, but that would be just my initial thoughts.
Okay. Looks like we'll have an audience question.
So first of all, thanks for coming. I enjoyed your talk a lot. I'm interested in what kinds of things can happen to young people that might cause them to do a sort of about face in terms of their online behavior. And I don't know if you can share any stories, either yours or your friends. Did something happen to make your friends stop using Twitter or switch from one service to another service? Or, what might cause you to stop using a particular technology? What kind of event?
That's a really good question. I know a lot of people who made a pretty conscious choice not to use Facebook, for instance, because one major reason was they found it was distracting and they were trying to study. So there's a pretty common habit among people I know to deactivate for like 3 weeks around midterms and then reactivate. I don't think that's quite the same thing as completely moving away from a service entirely. But definitely just looking at kind of analyzing the psychological effects that something has on them. So one of my friends said that he decided to leave Facebook because he realized he was checking it too much and that fear of missing out was informing his decision to be on there instead of an actual genuine interest in the lives of most of the people he was friends with. So leaving it because you want to spend more time on building in-person connections could be one reason. So it's important to not present any kind of online tool as in opposition to things happening in real life. I think that I like to look at online tools as complements to what happens in real life, or ways that I can find out about the things that happen in real life. Another reason that people would leave a service is because I think culture, they wouldn't like the culture anymore, or they feel like there's not really a place for them. And another reason would be, I'm trying to think, people definitely stop using certain services when they feel like they're leaving too much of a digital trail. So some people would say not use Twitter anymore because they feel like it's too tempting to post about things that happen in their daily life that they actually really would rather have not. Would not have seen public. Cannot make sentences. So thinking about just particularly on the upper end of adolescence, worrying about job searching, the way that a profile might look on you when you're being looked at professionally, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the issues around not relating to a culture of a site or an app anymore.
Yep. Let me ask one Dory question here to Adora. Let's see. This is from Mark Clank in Boulder. Adora, what is your take on limiting our kids' screen time, and what do you, as a digital native teenager, think is a reasonable way to do this?
So I come from a house where I was never exactly limited screen time-wise. My earliest experience was having, wow, did that ever happen? So when I was 6 years old, I would get really obsessive about whatever story I was writing, and I'd be on my laptop and I would skip dinner. And occasionally my mom would get a little bit mad about that because, you know, a kid skipping dinner just so she can finish her story, that excuse only holds up so many times. It was legitimate, though. When it came to being online, I would have Facebook conversations way too late into the evening. And I remember there was a period of time in my senior year in high school that my mom would log in the morning and she would say, Adora, it says that you were active on Facebook 3 hours ago, and this would be at 6 a.m. And I'd be like, yeah, no, that was totally a malfunction or something. Like, the app does that. Or, you know, I was on Facebook at 3 a.m. And my mom is giving me this, like, stare that just says, I knew it. But I'm in college now, so yay. As far as restricting screen time, I'm a big believer in living in the great outdoors, in taking advantage of all the opportunities that life has to offer you. But I also have had some of the most eye-opening, mind-blowing conversations of my life, not just in person, but also online. And so it really has to be a conversation, not a very authoritarian set of rules to me. So make it a conversation between you and your son or daughter about what they want out of their life and how they see the tools they're using online as a way to further that or be a distractor or whatever else.
I'm wondering, do you think that privacy should be taught in schools, specifically online privacy? And if so, how would it be taught? And when would it be taught? Elementary school, high school, middle school? Just curious about your thoughts.
That's an awesome thought. The one that so I know digital literacy. Increasingly, there are some workshops in schools, particularly in more like tech aware areas, I think. So I come from Redmond, which is right near Seattle, Microsoft headquarters. And I know around here that probably some schools offer this, that students in middle or high school are exposed to information about, okay, don't share this or be cautious. But that's pretty basic, and I think that an education on privacy is really important because when I started thinking about privacy, I will admit I came into it as the ultimate layperson. I was like, okay, my understanding of privacy is literally just what I've seen on the news and, you know, something that I've done myself and the fact that my parents are scared that, you know, all these different sites know this much about them. But that was my understanding. And I think that it's essential that in order to be informed and in order to have meaningful opinions on a lot of the issues that are central to our modern time that young people receive an education on, here's the information that you're basically giving up when you sign on to this service or this website, this app. Here's how you can control it. Here's who sees what, how it might be used. And that should start as soon as young people are becoming active online, which can be as early as late elementary school, I think. So, yeah. And I think that young people are often very capable of understanding much more than we think they are. So if you think, oh, well, a fifth grader isn't going to understand all of this language around privacy and all the legality and stuff like that, you know, talk to a fifth grader. That's a challenge. Maybe y'all should go back to your offices and ask yourself, how would I explain privacy to a fifth grader? And maybe you'll be surprised by some of the things that come up.
I'll take one Dory question here. This is from Alec Foster. Are there any online activists or student activists that particularly inspire you?
Online activists or student activists that particularly inspire me. Wow, there are so many. I would say Zach Mohammed, who started the Student Voice campaign. You should all check it out. StudentVoice.org is pretty awesome because he literally was this college student at University of Maryland who built something out of nothing. There wasn't really a coherent student voice movement, a movement for students to be treated as main stakeholders in the discussion around our own education reform, and he turned that into something pretty awesome. I also really love the work of a lot of different young people on change.org to start petitions, particularly relating to the way that women are perceived in the media. So the young women who are behind the petition to get Teen Vogue and 17 to stop photoshopping models, as well as those who called for the first presidential debate to be moderated by a female moderator in quite some time. They absolutely inspire me. If they admire me, that'd be amazing. But yeah, they truly inspire me. So those are some activists that I really admire.
First of all, thanks for coming out. Incredibly insightful talk and really appreciate it. You mused about whether privacy would be your generation's Vietnam, yet one topic you didn't cover was that of government surveillance. Wondering if that is a topic of concern for your generation. It's something we focus on a lot, but didn't hear you mention it. For us, you know, we think about privacy as being the choice of whether to share information, and government surveillance can take away that choice. So wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Really important point there. Yeah, so actually that reminds me, so I was at a poetry open mic a couple nights ago, and the theme was Halloween, and so every so often the MC would say a spooky thing in between the poems, and so one of his spooky things was grad school, and another one of his spooky things was the NSA. And we all laughed, but I think that it was indicative. There's definitely a very real awareness now that, so I mentioned that we put a lot of trust in the companies that we use every day, whether that's out of necessity because otherwise we can't quite deal with the fact that we're putting so much information out there, or whether that's out of actual trust. Not sure, but when it comes to government surveillance, like there's definitely a feeling that a carpet has been pulled out from underneath us, and that something that we thought was kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say always in our best interest, like a lot of times we disagree with various government policies and such, but that an organization, a group of people that we never would have thought would have any interest in like watching us is suddenly watching us. And that's a very weird thought to have as someone who's just, you know, casually using the internet for activism, for personal use and all the rest. So when it comes to the way that we think about being watched by the government, I think that most of the people I know are very much on the side of do not watch me. And there's nothing that I have to hide, but there's also no reason that that my information should be made public in that, or not made public, but should be viewable by individuals in the government. So I don't think, though, that, again, because of the lack of education around privacy at an earlier age, that a lot of young people are equipped to respond to the threat that's posed by government surveillance in a way that's necessarily that coherent. And that's something that I'd like to change.
Okay, last question.
Hi, thanks for coming. I, of course, like very much your story when you were talking about on which side of privacy you are on. It's something I get asked very often. I do user research a lot with users, and my friends ask me, like, which side of privacy are you on? You're at Google, right? So you get the same kind of questions, you know, questioning good and evil and all these kind of other things that come up. What I was thinking is what your friend meant when he said, like, on which side of, what is the other side? And what was he implying? You know, what do you think folks in your age kind of, how would they describe that?
I think the other side of privacy is envisioning a world in which everything you do is traced back to you, is very visible, where you have to, where there are no spaces to really be anonymous, where it's very easy for anyone to look up your name and find a record of everything you've done, where it's not easy to be forgotten. And that's a world that I would not want to live in. I think anyone who has ever made mistakes in their life, who has had those mistakes in some way recorded, would probably not want to live in that world. And we're all too human, I think, to live in a world in which privacy doesn't exist, or where a lack of privacy exists in a fashion like the one that I just described. I think also that, and back to the point of the surveillance by the government, that a lot of people worry that they can't have conversations on sensitive topics, or that they can't be free to talk about past experiences with the threat of authority figures standing in the way. So I think that standing for privacy means standing for a lot more than privacy. It means standing for open intellectual dialogue, and it means standing for freedom. So, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Nora.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Isn't that a wonderful feeling to be needed? Yeah, I agree. I agree. Good to hear.
Maybe after this week's trip, some downtime. Yeah, if you do be interested, we have any
Oh, Lawrence, you're
Oh, thank you. Not online.
not online.
Don't put it online.
Yes, it is. It's like distracted to you. Okay.
I should probably put a value on it. I was thinking like, oh, this is. No, no, no. That's what we're on.
Oh, like the black, the little black. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually know what's. So most. This is actually not.
Oh.
But most kids have little gift pounds to award, right? So I don't have much.
You should write it.
I was gonna say like a dollar a page or something. A dollar with any page I've written on.
You're like one of those little sections, random notes.
Yeah,
Like, I will
exactly.
here's page number 1. I will cut that in half. Yeah. So.
Oh, by the way, we have. Okay, so anyone. So you know who's engagement in Dr.
I think she's maybe she just got started. Yeah. She said, and then she mentioned Kevin, and she was like, yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.